Yeah. Perfect. Hi, everyone. Okay, so we're gonna do a final update on the accessibility statement. So that's Kelly. Is it ready to publish?
Yeah, we posted it for 3 weeks for comment. We really didn't get any feedback. So I'm going to assume silence is yes, and it is good to go. I'm not sure if we need any approvals from anyone internally in terms of legal or any of that. But in terms of it being ready to go, we can kind of put it wherever we want to. I have moved the document from draft to non-draft format. I did save the draft as a separate tab so that people can see how we got to where we got to it. Um,
So would you be able to share so people can see the statement and
Yep.
maybe read it out for those, especially people
Perfect.
watching after the fact?
Let me share this one right here. There we go.
Yeah, if you don't mind giving it a read, that would also be
So,
helpful.
accessibility at Thunderbird. So, our statement of commitment. Thunderbird is committed to digital accessibility and inclusion. As an open source project, Thunderbird is shaped by a global community working to make email communication and productivity tools accessible so that people with diverse needs and abilities can use them with dignity, independence, and confidence. And I
Love
think
it.
from a future reference point, when we're ready, we'll want to start talking about kind of our roadmap and what our plans are to continue our commitment to this as kind of a
Mhm.
secondary addition to this statement.
Totally. That's a good call. Yeah, great.
All right.
Yeah, so we'll be putting that. I already wrote it in the action item. I will post that up to, we've been using bolt.thunderbird.net, which is our design system site to hold a little bit of resource documentation until we perhaps split the two at some point. So that will go under the accessibility statement there on Bolt. Yeah. Uh,
My,
oh yeah, I can see your, so if you
my,
need help, I can jump in to help you, the internet. Oh, sure. And Alexander, I'll just add that to the agenda.
Thank you.
Maybe, so maybe stop your screen sharing. That might help you with your internet, unless we totally lost you.
we may have lost
Oof.
her.
Okay.
I
Oh, she's back.
somewhat heard Laurel giving a bit of the context on it. But my for some reason my internet. Oh, oh.
Waiting for her video replay to catch up. There we go. Oh, oh, there,
Hello?
Russell.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe kill your screen sharing. It might help you
Okay.
for now. Yeah. And we'll see how we go. I can always jump in to help you at
Your
some point too.
video as
Perfect.
well, probably.
Yeah.
Kill
Yeah, that's a
anything
good
that's
idea.
other than your audio so that we can at least hear you.
Amazing. Cool. Yeah, it was really, really slow for a second there. I kind of heard Laurel giving context to the design annotation discussion. Um, so I
No,
was gonna share a
Soul,
screen.
Soul, I
Oh,
didn't. I didn't at
oh,
all.
okay. Perfect. Well, design annotation discussion. Um, as I first started to like go through some stuff on calendar, because calendar creation or edit the dialogue has so many intricate components, or like we're creating new components. There was a lot of annotation happening. And it was definitely a bit of a burnout situation in which like we kept on like going back and forth with design itself. And we then realized that maybe it was too annotated. So we wanted to ensure that we took it out here to see what is helpful, what is missing, and what is unnecessary. We wanted to ensure that new components do have their own area because we just want to be able to recall them, as well as like once we have proper documentation on the accessibility annotations per existing components, we don't have to re-annotate them. They should just live on our design system. That being said, Laurel, do you want to share your screen, or I can also send a file?
No, I can share for everyone because they
Perfect.
probably all don't have access, and then I'll just follow you.
Yes.
And then people can see what you're talking about there, and just remember to zoom in where you can.
Well, honestly, first and foremost, like it does help seeing at an angle, like this is just the first screen, like a simple version, and this is also views. Every little part here is going to be all different states of each section. So here we're saying like there's a lot of sections that I have not really annotated in this one because they're all annotated separately in this one. So we have each variant. So a header can have a main view and a sub view, and I've annotated for both of them. But this one is an example that has not that many. The more we get into them, the more pieces they're going to have, and the more intricate it's going to get. And for like one of the ones that got the most amount of annotations, even though they're quite small, would be the repeat or a recurring event section. So in this case, we have a normal drop down. However, we also have a date input, but our date input is not going to be, we wanted it to be a date input that also enables normal text, so not only numerical values, because it's more common for a human being to say, hey, I'll see you on Wednesday, or what about meeting Wednesday, or like maybe November something, rather than like, let me think of like 11/21, 2026, right? Like humans tend to be able to give more word-like dates. So with that in mind, we wanted to make it as easy for the user to be able to also do that, so to be able to parse it. However, we're still having the component of the date input that allows you to have a calendar on it to select a date. So because of all of these kind of moments, not only do I have 3 versions here that are all noted, we actually like have 3 pages of this, except it just kept on getting too long. So I had to break it down into 3, 2, another 3. 3 pages of just this one section of the event dialogue, like the recurrent section. For certain components, it was easy enough to say, hey, this is just a selector. So I was just saying, hey, use this on-screen string, and depending on selection, like something will be displayed underneath because things change as some selectors are being used. But there's new components. So in this scenario, what I did is see component input date, because as I just discussed, like it's not just a normal MDN existing component, which means that I have started to annotate it here. So with Jesse on the design team, we try to annotate it, bringing in the MDN calendar, like whatever is as native as we can grab it to be, except just bringing an input and making it a combo box. So we did all these annotations to ensure that this new component is able to be accessible, as like usually something new that is not annotated will not have that easiness of accessibility compared to any other existing MDN tools. We also did some behavior annotations accompanying the accessibility ones, just because as it is a new component, we wanted to ensure that we also are able to navigate interactions not only for accessibility, but also how it should behave with non-accessibility tools. So all of these is a lot to digest. It did took quite a while because there was a lot of back and forth decision making, and as well as trying to keep everything consistent with the existing design system and not having things to look different from our design system, but is still behaving in a way that is accessible to the user. So please, thoughts on, hey, this is too much, and that's okay. Or maybe we need more information, or maybe you know what, there's other ways to do this, and you can save time.
Uh, so my first question is this essentially matching what's in the manual config flow for the A11Y annotations? Because I'm much more familiar with that. Like I've been able to
Yes,
spend time looking at and
yes,
reviewing it, whereas this I haven't.
yeah.
Okay, perfect.
This is definitely new, and the only reason why I brought it
Yeah,
outside is because I'm using the input date constantly throughout the calendar event. So,
yeah,
but something that would be a little bit more familiar would be, for example, something like this, right? So I'm giving you a note that this section is an H2, and I'm giving you like button, selector, input, like there are more direct or easy components to annotate.
yeah. So a couple things that I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed going through the annotations on mostly on manual config, but it seems to be the same here is one thing is we're using, I'm guessing a lot of this is coming from the Firefox team.
Mm-hmm.
Someone mentioned that there was a plugin. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is using a lot of stuff that we'll never use because they're not
Okay.
real HTML
Mm-hmm.
elements. Like for example, selector. That's not a
Mm-hmm.
real thing. That's something that's built into Zool that Firefox
Mm-hmm.
uses that we'll never use. And there's
Mm-hmm.
other examples that I noticed, like the checkbox element was referenced at one point
Mm-hmm.
as being used. And again, that's not an actual HTML
Mm-hmm.
thing. We won't use that. Um, so that is one thing. Another is I noticed that it tends to be extremely over verbose about things
Yeah.
to the point where it can actually could confuse someone who's not as familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Like it says to put aria checked and on a checkbox, but you would never do that because that is baked into the checkbox. That's why you
Mm-hmm.
use an input type checkbox to begin with, is it already has all that done. You would never manually add and toggle that, which it makes it sound like you would by
Mm-hmm.
saying to
Makes it sound
use
like you are
that.
forcing it to be always checked to a degree.
Or no, no, it sounds like it wants
Mm.
you to us to add in like additional
Okay.
logic
Mm-hmm.
to actually toggle aria checked on it, which is not something that you do because an
Mm-hmm.
input checkbox that's baked in. You don't, that's why you use it to not recreate and have to
Mm-hmm.
do that. That's if you're doing something custom. So it tends to be, I think, very much over verbose, um, to the point where it can be confusing at times, because it seems like it's asking you to do something that it's
Mm-hmm.
not really. Um, because I think what
Mm-hmm.
it is it's just kind of reiterating,
Yeah.
um, that those are things that should happen. But if you're using an input or any semantic element correctly, that's already going to happen. You don't actually have to specify that. Um, those were my two big feedbacks that I'd had looking at the the annotations so far. Um, it too, I think as a developer using it, the really important things are more the intended interaction patterns, like what is your expected, if there's like arrow key navigation involved because we're doing an actual like custom component, what is your expected pattern that you're intending this to follow, or like there was a thing that came up
Mm-hmm.
with using tabs somewhere to reveal something which we didn't go with because I don't think it was the right interaction pattern. We talked that out. But the
Mm-hmm.
idea, even though it wasn't what ended up being the thing, the idea that you're giving what your intended pattern is, so that at least we can see that and we're not just trying to tell from the visual what is going on. Um, those are the higher level things like that are, I think, as a developer, the
So,
more important things to show what the intent is. And that can get a little lost when it's so verbose. Even though
right.
it's in there, I think it just tends to get lost because there's so much.
Now, would it be better because like what I had shown you before and what you have been given in the past as well is like a wireframe that is annotated itself.
Mhm,
Um, would it be better for us to identify what components exist and create a bit of a tool like this in which like we have behavior annotations on like how it's meant to behave as well as our considerations for accessibility in which like again like we're still working on them, we're using like things from Mozilla, but I know that in the future we do want to create our own annotation system, so
mhm.
this is really useful for us to know what tools you need. Like for example, I know the CVS ones have a little bit more of a kind of like input situation, like a form-ish, because they don't have you an area like yes, you have areas for notes, but like this one only gives us name and role. So if we have any
Yeah.
extra information that you need, it's not listed, unlike the other ones. So if there's anything like
Hmm.
that, it's very useful for us as well.
Yeah, I think the more like stuff like name and role is useful in a very generic way, but that's the
Hmm.
sort of thing that for the most part it's not that's something that comes with the layout and the markup and whatever
Hmm.
essentially. There might be questions at times, but that's the stuff where we're less likely to have questions when implementing versus the actual behavior and interaction patterns and what the intent is there is where we tend to have a lot more questions. And this is definitely moving towards addressing some of those, like uh the example that I'd mentioned before with the tabs. Like that's
Hmm.
good that you're saying, okay, we intend this to be tabs and so we know, okay, based on that, and then what the patterns are that you follow for tabs and et cetera. That's really useful. So there's definitely a lot of useful stuff in here. I just think there's too much. We need to.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like while it can be useful, the moment that it gets overbearing or too it's like how I feel when I have to go through documentation itself. If it's a single page with like too much information, my brain will shut down. And I totally get it because just doing this process, my brain shut down multiple times. Which is why I wanted to check in with you because I wanted to see what do developers need? Like specifically if we know that now that name and role can be useful for example, you said layout and markup, but it's not as useful as other things as like navigational bits. Uh,
Right.
what would be the key things that you would like to hear from design when it comes to annotations?
I mean, yeah, the interaction behavior is the most important,
Hmm.
so that we understand how it's supposed to work so that we can match that, not just what it's supposed to look like, because
Hmm.
those are very different things, obviously. Um, and it's not always obvious from just looking at the designs, even if there's really good flows and everything, how a
Hmm.
specific component is supposed to interact and work. So that's really the most important. That aside, when you were building a complex component, um, something like the combo box that you mentioned, where you want to be able to have the calendar drop down, but you also want to be able to type in it. That's
Hmm.
where the more detailed stuff can become more useful because it's
Hmm.
not just interaction patterns at that point. There's more about how you intend roles to work that affects announcement and things like that. Um, and I expect a lot of this stuff will be a back and forth sometimes when it gets handed off and we look and we're like, oh, well, that doesn't really match this or whatever. And that's always going to be a thing. And that's not a problem to me. But having a place to get started and a place to have those discussions earlier before we're in the
Mm,
middle of implementing it is
absolutely.
really nice. And when you have the notes here, it gives that. Like the thing with the tabs came up before work ever even really started because Martin had
Mm,
reviewed the guidance, the annotations. Then he came to
mm,
me and was like, "Do you agree with this?" And I was like, "Oh, not really." And so then we went to Rebecca and discussed it, and we came to
mhm.
a happy conclusion there. And that's ideal because then all the discussion, all the decisions, everything happened before we were in the middle of working on it, and it's now waiting
Mhm.
on that. Because even though we didn't agree with the guidance, there was guidance there that was a starting point to discuss.
Right.
And so that's really nice to have.
That is great to know. And I'm just trying to go through any kind of questions. I know that one of the questions that Laurel had added on the agenda was like, what should have lived in the design file versus elsewhere? And that is a great question because obviously location or context matters.
Yeah, so if it's behavior of a component and how that component should interact, that definitely to me should be in the design file for sure. If it's
Hmm.
more higher level, how a whole like flow should act or things like that, that might be something that's better for a statement of work or something like that.
Okay.
It would kind of depend because if it's something that is related to the design system components, anything like that, to me, that definitely should be in the design file without
Hmm.
question. When you get to the higher level stuff, that's when it sometimes the design files don't, without a lot of just like shoving notes in there, give the same level of being able to describe things as something in a document.
Hmm.
Um,
Sold. Jason had a comment. Jason, do you want to talk about your comment in the chat a little bit
Yeah,
more?
sure. I'm largely in alignment with what's being talked about here,
Mhm.
with working through annotations, etc. Yeah, trying to keep designers out of providing engineering guidance, right, is key
Mm.
because that tends to muddy the waters, and I think tends to muddy those communications where in some cases that guidance actually could go against what the component documentation already has, etc. that engineers are using. um, right? If to say use an ARIA label here versus using an ARIA label by, et cetera, et cetera. Like, so, keeping designers out of that realm tends, I think, just having a little bit more delineation there is helpful. And I think, right, you sort of mentioned that directly already. That's where this discussion has sort of been going. But I just thought, yeah, the way in there that uh, having that line is, I think, a little bit helpful so that it keeps designers from also guessing what's the sort of best when they may not know the constraints that engineering is working under, et cetera.
yeah, I mean, that largely mirrors parts of what I was saying as well, I think. And that's where the existing stuff gets a little too specific and um, just too verbose at points, is when it gets to some of the detailed stuff like that.
So, and this is a bit of a proposed current solution. This can always be like changed as like we learn through going forward. Um, for wireframes, because like we see here is more of a component information. So on those situations, I think it may be best to keep the design system with the correct annotation. So maybe we can do a quick sync to a degree and annotate uh, the design system, just because there's a lot of things that are reused, and that's a whole goal of the design system. So that way, when we have new uh, actual wireframes, then we have it a bit easier and we can just tell you, hey, go to like component A of the design system, because that way it's already annotated on something that both development and design have already agreed upon. Um, and to me right now that sounds like the next step, but I want to ensure that this sounds good for everyone as well.
So I just
Yeah, I
thought
mean,
I'd show, I just thought I'd show the proposed annotation
Hmm.
levels there, that because you're speaking to them, but not
Yeah.
as explicitly. So there's three levels here: a standard component, that would be going in the design system. The second level, which would be a modified or combined pattern, and then level three would be new, complex, or risky interaction.
yeah, those make sense to me. And that very much goes with what I was saying of like number three is where we really want and need more guidance when you have complex components that don't have necessarily follow an established pattern.
Right.
That's when we really need to talk and think things through more of how keyboard interaction is going to work, focus is going to work, all of those sort of things, and how it's going to be marked up, how what, because even if it's not following a true pattern, you have to base it on
Hmm.
something. And so,
Yeah.
what is the patterns that we're using to follow to make this workable? Why we've chosen those patterns versus
Hmm.
others, etc.
This is incredible, you guys. Okay, and I just so like I am aware, like I just want to voice out my understanding of like where we're heading, so I don't assume that we're all on the same page. Is that at the moment it seems more productive for us to annotate components and sync on components rather than like a whole wire flow, or the full wire flow can be annotated as like this is the order of jumping, but no more than that. No annotation of components there per se, but annotating components separately, so one is not over done constantly, and two, they can be discussed with development as a separate ticket if needed. So it's not as, everything at once could be too much. And again, this is my understanding of like what it sounds that could be good. So I
Mhm.
just want to make sure that this is where everyone is at.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good first step. It also will declutter and make things
Hmm.
not as verbose on
Hmm.
the like flow pages because each component won't have its stuff repeated there. It'll be
Yeah.
off when you go look at the component.
Absolutely, and that's something that I also noticed as I was trying to annotate some stuff with Jesse, that like we were documenting at the same time as like certain annotations, behavior patterns or like behavior differences. So that's why we started to separate them when we are creating a new component. But I think they're very useful as well for like any current component existing in our design system. So no, this is great, you guys. I'm so excited.
Okay, so I just highlighted there, like
Hmm.
just the note on what can be inherited because that's really important as we consider refinements. So,
Hmm.
um, and then this question, I don't think you've addressed yet.
That you're right. So where should the annotations live? Currently we work through Figma and we're posting it on Zeppelin once it's ready. However, there are other areas that we could also post it. Like on here we see tickets, system design system documentation, as well as checklists. But is there any past knowledge of success that anyone in the call knows about? Oh, you're muted.
So because right now for the front end team, at least on desktop, we consider Zeppelin our source of truth. That is
Hmm.
where the final things should live,
Yeah.
essentially. And so having it there makes sense because it's going to be with the design, it's going to be where we're looking. Um, and then as far as if there's specific accessibility, like acceptance criteria, like you have noted here, that needs to live in the Bugzilla ticket, I would think, that goes with that. However, that's going to probably be a lot harder to manage um, in general, just because I know design isn't in Bugzilla nearly as much. And the tickets don't necessarily reflect specific screens or things like that when they're created. It's not like a one-to-one mapping of ticket to component or something like that. Um,
Right.
so that is something that we probably almost on the front end team would need to manage as we create the tickets to make sure whatever requirements get copied over from design when we create the ticket, essentially.
I guess like the acceptance criteria can also be annotated when posted on Zeppelin, just so like whenever and like front end moves it anywhere it needs to be, like this information is still there. If it's a link or even just like a copy paste situation of it, it's
Right.
still
Like
existing.
if we could get the specific acceptance criteria for like given components or things somehow incorporated into Zeppelin in a
Mm-hmm.
visible, usable way, that would be ideal so that then when we create the tickets, it's easy to see those and
Mm-hmm.
put it in there. Oh, Wayne's got his hand up, it looks like.
Yeah, I was going to say, with regarding the Bugzilla stuff, it does. I think it does make sense since the developers interacting with design, um, and they have the context of where the work is happening. It probably does make sense for them to put the link to Zeppelin and into Bugzilla. Um, and and maybe it's not necessary to put it in every bug that gets touched by that design. Maybe for example, there's a meta or overarching meta bug which talks about how the work is going to be done, that people can reflect back to, let's say, a central spot. But then also, I don't know if this is what you were getting at as far as annotating Zeppelin, but it would be nice if the link to Bugzilla was also in Zeppelin.
That would be good too.
That would be
Um,
helpful for the developer, I would think. I'm sorry, design.
so, and this is just maybe a naive design question. When it comes to creating a specific components, or would it be useful, or how feasible could it be um for it to be created within Storybook, for example? Just because I know or I
Hmm.
believe that maybe
Yeah.
a goal towards the end, but I think it makes the most sense to have these connected of acceptance criteria and like how to have annotated this component if we have a ticket specifically to create the component.
Yeah,
So
for
that's how
items
we,
that exist
oh,
outside of W3 and all of that,
Sure.
we have some of the design already in
Mm-hmm.
Figma along with, we should be putting more in, we just haven't done it
Mm-hmm.
yet. And then we'll be carrying that over to the documentation site. Anything from Storybook should have the component more or less fully coded. I'm going to guess, Alexander, this is where you're going to go because it depends
yeah,
on there's some things that would be missing necessarily with it not being fully in context, but just for what exists for that
Mm-hmm.
component in its
right.
unattached state.
So in theory, we're supposed to be, and I'll admit it doesn't always happen. When we create a component, there is supposed to be a matching story and storybook for it. And we are striving, pushing for creating components up front first, and then as their own stories that are just in storybook, and then carrying those into the views, whatever, where they're used. Um, that's not as consistent right now as it should be, but it's getting better, I would say. We do have a lot of like the new manual config things in Storybook that we've been working on as their own components under Account Hub, which some of those are real design system stuff and some are Account Hub specific still,
Mm-hmm.
I think, because Account Hub's been such a weird, long, ongoing thing. Um,
Yeah.
But yeah, that there definitely should be whenever we're creating a generic component, a story and storybook for it. Um, and it should be able to be used, reviewed there independently of anything else. There are things that we can't put in storybook because of the way they interact with certain parts of the code
Mm-hmm.
base. But for basic, simple components, they should always be able to go there.
That's perfect. And the reason why I was bringing that up is because Wayne is right, and it's good to have them kind of like have a Bugzilla link to it. If a component goes like the goal is to reuse them everywhere, right? So obviously there will be too many tickets that have it, but having a parent component that like it's connected to Storybook, that is something to a degree a little bit more static, but it's still a documentation version of it. I think it would be good for it to be also marked as a comment on the Zeppelin one. Even if a component has not been closed yet or like still like pending to be created, it's still good to keep track of where it's going to be going. So both developers and design know what's happening with that one. Oh, muted.
That would be really good going forward, as well as teams
Mhm.
expand, because you don't
Mhm.
necessarily people don't necessarily know what components exist already in the
Mhm.
code base. And so if there's actually like a link to Storybook sort of
Exactly.
thing, um, that would be useful, because then someone that's new on the team, let's say, that didn't realize we already have that, sees it immediately and knows where to find it, from either direction, so
Right.
that.
And when we posted on the sign as like, hey, this is given to you as developers to create, you already will have a link to the Zeppelin design system component. And in the design system component on Zeppelin, you can say like this already exists because it's connected to this bug that is like this component. And once the developer goes in there, it can see if it has been created or if it hasn't, and at least take it from there.
Mhm.
So excited. Alrighty. Well, I believe that's it for the section of accessibility annotations. Lots of good thoughts, and I am thankful to everyone who had some comments. But now we can move to Alexander with accessibility testing.
Yeah, so we've had some good progress on desktop for this. Um, we already had everything from the Moco team that they had for testing enabled. I managed to finally get all of the details worked out. So we also have Axe testing enabled for our automated testing now. It's still in a patch, but it's pretty much ready to land, I think. And that makes it so that we can do much more in-depth testing on every patch. And we can enable it by default. It's simple for developers to just say in their test setup to add accessibility testing in, and it just automatically tests everything that changes throughout the course of that test. Every time something updates, it checks all of its accessibility guidelines and reports failures at the end. And it's been modified a bit to work with how we have things for the design system, and the fact that it's being used in tests where it's not a true web environment. And so far, it's enabled for just one small set of components, the stuff related to in-app notifications. And it's worked great there. It did find some actual things that got fixed, so that's good. Um, in addition to that, some of you may have seen probably a month or so ago, the Firefox accessibility team posted a AI review skill that they thought we might be able to make use of for doing accessibility reviews on patches in Fabricator using an AI agent. I took a look at that to see if it would work for us. Unfortunately, as it was, it did not, for a variety of reasons. However, I was able to go ahead and get it updated to work for Thunderbird, using our design tokens for colors versus the Firefox ones, because it would complain about that. And at the time we were still on Mercurial, so I had updated it to use that, though that's no longer a concern. And it also, I incorporated it checking all of the items on the accessibility checklist that we have, and reports back failures from those, as well as the things that the Firefox team had flagged. And it will give you an output at the end of anything that it couldn't test, for whatever reason, automatically, so that you have a manual checklist of things to then go back and review. And that I've tried it on a few patches so far. It seems to be working well. Once I've done some more updates to it and everything, I'll be sharing that with anyone else who wants to potentially use it or doing accessibility reviews on Fabricator patches. So that would fill two pretty significant holes in our testing story, I guess you could say right now, which is actually filling in more than just hit testing during our normal browser tests, and then also making sure that anybody, even someone not as knowledgeable, can do an accessibility review on a patch in Fabricator when they're reviewing it normally. So yeah, those are two really big improvements that we have coming.
That's great. I'm excited as it goes along. Now, for next meeting, it will be August 12th, same time as this meeting. Now, who would like to facilitate the next meeting? Stickers, maybe?
Have to check the calendar.
You know,
Laurel,
it's
if
summer. Everybody's on holidays.
fair enough. If no one wants to take it, I could take it again, Laurel, or if you want, you could take it. Like, I don't mind
Someone
either
else
way.
should jump in. So
No,
yeah.
I was sorry, I was on mute, but I said I can do it if no one else wants to.
Okay, awesome. We'll schedule you in. It's not scary for anyone else. I
Yeah.
help you and build the agenda as the month kind of progresses as well. Just a note too, we did skip the section on community Q&A. So if anyone's listening and you have a question for or about Thunderbird and accessibility, please either write it in the comments below the video or go to our Matrix channel, which is Thunderbird-A11Y, and ask your question, and we will try to answer it for you and yeah, in the next upcoming meeting. Yeah. So back to you.
Yes. No, that is perfect. If anything that is going to come up for topics, as you mentioned, that should be added. And for actions, I know that we have Laurel to publish the accessibility statement to the Bold document site. And yeah, everyone, thank you so much.
Hold on, I don't, does anyone have anything to add for the next agenda? It's top of mind right now. I know, Casey, you have some stuff you want to post to the repo. You might be.
Yeah, I might need a little support in posting that, but I completed a just a small manual audit on Mac of the setting panels, and just wanted to share my findings on that.
I'm on mute. Awesome. Adding that in as a note. Anyone else before I'll take off for the rest of the day. All right, I think we're good, so we can wrap it up.
Perfect. So yeah, as mentioned, the one action we have listed is for Laurel to publish the accessibility statement to the Bold document site. And other than that, we are good. We'll see everyone next meeting, which will be Wednesday, the 12th of August at, well, 9 a.m. Pacific time, but 12 EDT and 4 UTC. Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.